Strategies for home and school. Thank you, Kelly, for remembering that recording. And my name is Stacia Stribling. I'm the Deputy Director of Form Families Forward, and I'm excited to be joined today by Lindsay Zach. And we'll do some introductions in a minute. But before we get started, for those of you who might be new to Form Families Forward, just want to give a brief overview. We are a family-led resource center in Northern Virginia. We support foster, adoptive, and kinship families who are raising children, youth, and young adults with specialized needs. We also work with professionals who serve these families as well. What we do is offer free trainings, free consultations to families. We do some events. We have a resource page, so families who are looking for additional resources can check out our directory online. We also offer some peer support groups, and those are for both caregivers and for youth. And we are a partner to Virginia Tiered Systems of Support through the Virginia Department of Education. If you are attending this session live, if you're online with us right now, then you are eligible for a certificate of attendance. In order to receive that, just shoot an email to Natalie Johnson Abbott. Said that right. Sometimes I confuse those two. Natalie Johnson Abbott. And right now, Kelly is dropping her email in the chat. So just grab that and you can shoot her an email and she will send you a certificate of attendance. Because you have signed up for this webinar series, you are going to have access. You do not need to re-register, but just to let you know, we have 2 more after this. Next Tuesday, our own Kelly Henderson is going to be talking about making special education work for students with FASD. So we're going to dig some more into those IEPs and functional behavioral assessments and behavior intervention plans through that lens of FASD. And then the following Tuesday on the 28th, we've got Understanding Therapy Options for FASD with Jessica Wilson, who's a licensed clinical social worker. You are already registered for those, so you'll get the reminder links. And if you cannot make it, you will get the recordings as well for those 2 sessions. The other thing that we offer for folks who do not need to be local, because I know we have people joining us from all over the states today and perhaps beyond, is we do have Learning Your Way. This is our online learning module. Registration for that opens February 1st, so you can check out our website for that registration link. And these are go at your own pace courses, self-paced, and we have courses on trauma, on special education, on other health impairments, positive parenting. So there's a slew of things there. And if you are a certified foster parent, there are certificates that you get at the end. So that might be something that you can use towards recertification as well. For folks who are local to Virginia, we want you to mark your calendar, Saturday, May 3rd. We are going to be having our annual Spring Forward Foster, Adoptive, and Kinship Family Fun Day. It will be at the Manassas campus of George Mason University again from 8:30 to 2. We've got programming for caregivers and programming for youth. So be sure to look for that on our website and sign up for that. As we hope to have that out the end of this month, beginning of February for registration. Again, for local people, we do have a Stronger Together youth peer support group starting. This is for ages 14 to 22. It's an 8-week session, Wednesday nights from 6 to 7:30, starting January 22nd, which I believe is next Wednesday. It is clinician led. It is free of charge, and we host this at our office in Fairfax City. And Kelly will drop that registration link in there for you in case you have a youth that would be interested in this support group. We also have caregiver support groups. We do meet twice a month. So once is in person and once is virtual. So if you are not local, but would still like to join in a support group, you are welcome to sign up for this and just attend those virtual sessions as well. The in-person sessions are the 3rd Wednesday of each month and the virtual the 1st Sunday. The times are a little bit different for that virtual versus that in-person. And Kelly will drop that registration link in the chat for you. All right. So without further ado, we're going to get started here. We've got a poll to launch for you. We're kind of interested to see who is in the room with us this evening. And so the question, Kelly is going to launch that poll, and you'll see a question about what brings you to this webinar. Are you parenting a child with a diagnosis with an FASD diagnosis, parenting a child you suspect has an FASD? Are you a professional whose clients might have a diagnosis, or maybe you don't have any personal experience and you are just here because you're curious? We welcome you as well. All right, we've got lots of parents in the room with diagnosis, and with some about 53, a little over half of you are parenting a child with a diagnosis. 13% right now parenting a child that you suspect has a diagnosis. 33% of you are professionals. And we do have someone out there who is just curious with no personal experience. So welcome. All right, this helps us out a little bit. We are going to be talking tonight about strategies both for home and school, but we can also think about these in therapeutic settings. We can think about these in other settings as well. So there should be a little bit of something for everyone. So to let you know who we are, as I said, my name is Stacia Stribling. I am the Deputy Director of Form Families Forward. Prior to being immersed in this world, I was a classroom teacher. So I started out as a first and second grade teacher in Fauquier County, Virginia. From there, I went on and I earned a doctorate in early childhood at George Mason University. And then I transitioned into being a teacher educator. So for about 23 years, I taught at George Mason University, teaching teachers, both pre-service and in-service teachers. What got me into this world is I became a mom. My husband and I became foster parents, and these two little cuties on the screen are our children. Jaden is now 13 and Aubrey is now 10. This picture is a little bit old. We do live on a farm out in Fauquier County, and so that is our baby goat Polly. She's a little bit bigger now, but we tend to nurture creatures of all sorts here at this house. And so I am a part-time farmer. We have a working farm, and we sell peaches and apples to public during the summer and the fall. So that is me. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Zach. My husband and I adopted 4 kids from foster care, 2 of which have diagnosis of FASD. I'm an avid reader and a hiker. Most recently, I've worked as a family resource navigator at Reclaimed Hope Initiative here in Charlottesville, Virginia, and my background is in social work. And one fun fact is I recently started fostering puppies for the local SPCA. And it is a lot of work, but it is a lot of joy as well. And it gives our family something to focus on and be happy about together. So that's been my new adventure that I've taken on. So don't have a whole farm yet, but the goals for tonight are just to understand the impact of FASD on the different domains of the brain, which we'll go over, identify effective strategies for both home and at school. A lot of these overlap, but want to give you guys some practical things to take with you. Before we start, just because we know somebody here is curious, I just want to go over the definition of FASD. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorders are a lifetime disability that affects the brain and body of people who are exposed to alcohol in the womb. Each person with FASD has both strengths and challenges and will need specific supports to help them succeed with many different parts of their daily life. And a lot of those impact the challenges are impacted on the brain domains that you'll see in the next slide. First, other issues that can impact a child's developing brain, particularly the stress system, involve foster care, number of placements, experiences of trauma, abuse, neglect, and the parenting strategies for trauma and attachment. Those are all wonderful things, and they work really well with our kids. There's really no other way to do it. But a lot of times with kids with FASD, it only goes so far. So if you find yourself learning new strategies, parenting completely different than you used to, and you're still saying like, oh, something is not clicking for my kid. Um, a lot of times those strategies aren't enough in and of themselves to really move the needle for someone with FASD. So the brain domains impacted by FASD, and I like to start at executive functioning because that involves the skills needed to organize and control thoughts and behaviors. So that's pretty substantial skill for school and home and life in general. So you might have difficulty with planning and organizing and problem solving. So a lot of times, if kids with FASD are known from not learning from their mistakes, and this is very frustrating for parents and teachers alike, but it has to do with this not being able to problem solve based on feedback gotten in the last time this happened. Another one would be ability to manage emotions, to self-regulate. So a lot of kids with FASD have very strong emotions. They express them very loudly. um, and just really, it can be like happiness to sadness to anger to frustration. It can be just really feeling all those emotions and expressing them as they feel them. Memory is a huge one with school. My One of my kiddos with FASD has huge memory delays, and it's been caused a lot of problems at school with learning how to read. And also just learning kind of how remembering from year to year how the classroom operates. So a lot of frustration from teachers and thinking like, oh, why is he doing this? And of course a lot of times it's thinking that it's something bad, like a defiance or a task refusal, when in reality it's more of just he doesn't remember from last year anything about the day. He doesn't remember that you're supposed to put your name on the sheet worksheet when you get it. He doesn't remember that when everybody else gets up to go to the morning meeting, he's sitting in his chair because you have to tell him to do that. So memory has a huge impact, and I on school is what I meant to say. Language is another one. Language developed may be delayed. So, like I have one child that did have some speech delays, but also the it's not only just the expressive language. So it's not only them talking, it's also the receptive language, their ability to be able to hear instructions. And so a lot of times, what we say in the FASD circles is, like, okay, did you hear me? Did you hear what I said? I asked you to, unload the dishwasher, and my kids will say yes, 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 and then nothing happens, and then 5 minutes later, I'm like, hey, do you remember the dishwasher? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So now it's good to say, like, repeat it back to me. Let me hear you say what I ask you to do, because you really want to make sure they actually are able to hear it. Thinking and reasoning, cognition, maybe having difficulty reasoning or understanding complex ideas. Stacia and I were just talking earlier about our kiddos who are around the fourth grade level grade, and things are getting harder, and there's becoming a widening gap between them and their peers, because as the curriculum gets harder, those complex ideas are very hard to follow. So we're seeing that in our own kids right now as they get a little bit older, and so that's those complex ideas are very challenging. Attention, we all know about this one. It's easy distracted or difficulty paying attention, especially we know with kids with ADHD and FASD, with areas that they're not interested in. So I have a kid that is so interested in science. He is, but he could care less about reading. And so, it changes throughout the day what the challenge is. Science, he is locked in, he is participating. Reading, he is laying on the floor, trying to crawl under his desk, out the classroom, so definitely depends on what they're interested in, and that does make it easier for them to give their attention to. Academic achievement may have difficulties with aspects of the curriculum, particularly math and abstract concepts. This is a good one for yeah, this is good to know for kids with FASD to really advocate for those math classes and skills because that's very common for our kiddos. Brain structure and functioning, they may have a smaller head or brain size, history of seizures or epilepsy. So one of my kiddos has a head size that's in the 2 percentile for, kids his age. So very small head. My other child with FASD has a completely normal size head. So all of these, you can have FASD and have some and a different combination of all of these. But, I remember when we were getting him tested, the clinician said, you don't have your head is not that small with just ADHD. This is something brain based, a neuro developmental issue. So, which FASD falls into that. Adaptive behavioral and social communication, difficulty with day to day living. So, skills like getting dressed, being able to take a shower independently, being able to, for the older kids, being able to, do chores that you think are so easy. How is this so hard? We're helping you do this every day. How is this so challenging? You really have to look at it as a developmental delay of like, okay, my 9-year-old still can't dress himself. We are practicing, but there are a lot of adaptive delays like that with FASD. And then the social piece. Just obviously social skills are so talked about these days, and it's great that we have so many supports around that. But one of my kids with FASD, he really has to be supervised, and it's not because of any sexual things or anything like that, but he just cannot interact with people and stay calm without getting upset. And so that's a skill that at 14 he is still very much learning. So that's a challenge for sure. Motor skills, they may have difficulty with coordination and balance or gripping a pencil. So one of the things that we've really seen is handwriting has been a big problem with a lot of with many of kids with FASD. So this is how kind of that shows up in the school system. And a lot of times they end up working with like an OT or something like that to help with those skills. In addition, one that's not on here that we will cover is sensory integration. So that's, we'll get to that later, but that is one that's also included in these. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So, in a minute, we're going to get to some of those specific brain domains and some strategies tied to those specifically, but there are 3 areas in general that are really important to focus on. And you're going to see how these, I'm going to go through these 3, but then you'll see later how these weave into some of those specific strategies we give for the brain domains. So what you really need to do is think of modification in 3 areas. And the first one is the environment. So the symptoms that you're seeing with these children are not willful, they're not intentional. This is based on a brain that has developed differently. And so focusing on constantly trying to fix the child or fix the person can get everybody super frustrated. And you really meet with a lot more success when you think about, well, how can I change the environment to support a brain that might be different? And so in general, this looks like supervision, supervision, supervision. And Lindsay said this before, you would think that a child who is 14 or 10 is able to have a play date and be able to play independently with a peer. But with our kiddos, there's a lot of conflict that can occur. So always being around, sort of being that person to support and get them through some of those struggles is very important. Also, their impulse control is really bad. So supervising, I can't tell you how many times my 10-year-old daughter has cut her hair. We did that again over Christmas break, and we are 10, almost 11, and we're still in that phase where we need to hide the scissors and supervise that use. The other thing about the environment is low stimulation environments, right? We don't do well. We get super overwhelmed with too much stimuli. So, bedrooms that have minimal things in it, just the basic needs. Having too many toys can be overwhelming. Classrooms that have too much visual input, and that's really hard, but important to get across to teachers, right? Sometimes that decorating and filling every space on the wall is way too much for these kids. Structure, consistency, and predictability. They may really resist that structure sometimes, and it may seem like, oh, they do better going with the flow, but in fact, it's that structure that helps them more than anything else. The second area to modify is our expectations. With a lot of the symptoms, as I was saying before, it looks pretty willful or it can look defiant, and we need to start thinking can't, not won't. So if there's something that they are not doing, a request they're not meeting, it might not be that they're choosing to do that. It's that they really literally cannot. And so when we frame it like that, we can start thinking, what supports can we put into place? Also be thinking developmental age, not chronological age. Dysmaturity is something you'll hear often in the world of FASD. So you may have a youth in this picture here on the slide who is 18 years old. Their expressive language may be that of a 20-year-old, right? They may be advanced in that area, but social skills, they're really more like a 7-year-old in that area. And so when we think about an 18-year-old, we really need to be thinking about where are they actually developmentally in order to give them the supports that they need, because that is where they're going to meet with success. That's where they are. And that's what we need to work with. And interdependence is often the goal, not necessarily independence, right? I'm hearing a lot, my daughter is in 5th grade, and here in Virginia, in our county, 6th grade is middle school. And I get a lot of, well, she has to be able to do this because in middle school, she's going to have to do this independently. And I'm like, but that cannot be a goal for her, because independence is not going to be a goal. She is going to need a lot more support than a typical peer. How we use those strategies is also something we need to modify. And so that's being proactive, right? We don't really do well when we're reactive with these kids. So how can we think ahead? How can we plan ahead? How can we make the environment so, and think about our expectations before we put things into place so that we are really ready and proactive for that. Repetition is key, keeping things slow, simple, and consistent. And of course, it's very important to build on their strengths, because these children, young adults, individuals, they have incredible strengths. And sometimes we can get lost in the challenges and forget about that piece. So make sure that we're really identifying what is it they're good at, and let's focus and build on that. So these are just sort of the overall, in general, 3 areas to modify in supporting individuals with an FASD. If you're not familiar with Dr. Vanessa Spiller, I do encourage you to look up her work. And I think Kelly's going to drop in the chat right now her website, jumpstartpsychology.com, for you all to check out. This is a free resource that she adds, that she offers on that site. And so you are free to grab this off of that website. She does have some books for purchase that have been really powerful for me as a parent in understanding my kids. And so she's come up with this ability wheel, which looks at those different brain domains. And I love this because so you'll see like executive functioning here at the top. This wedge shows that executive functioning domain. And then you'll see these different colored dots. And so you can actually map out for your child, like if executive functioning, if there are severe impairments, then you can draw a line from that red dot to the red dot in that executive functioning pie to sort of see that they're functioning there. And then as it moves outward, they are more adept in that brain domain, right? So below average to above average to exceptional. And she used this idea of the wheel, because if we think of a wheel, the smaller the wheel, the harder it has to work, right? So if you're looking at people with some severe impairments, that kind of shrinks that size of the wheel, which means there's a lot more work that needs to be done. Also, the smoother the wheel, the easier it will roll, right? If you've got a wheel that's kind of jagged and all over the place, that gets a little bit trickier, that they need a lot more support in that area. So let me show you some little a couple examples here. So I drew on one of these, and so this is a child who may be more typical developing, but you can see that We'll start here with adaptive functioning. We've got some average abilities in adaptive functioning. And then when you get to executive functioning, oh, that's a little bit below average. But our affect and emotional regulation is pretty average. Attention, a little bit below average. But then you get into these other domains, and we're functioning pretty average in terms of memory, language, cognition, academic performance, right? So looking at this wheel, it kind of looks like a profile of what might be typical ADHD, right? Where some of our bigger deficits or more challenges in executive functioning and attention. How easily will this wheel roll, right? You might have a couple of bumps. You might have a couple of little snafus as you're going along. But in essence, the effort needed is going to be kind of minimal, right? In order for this person to make it through the day with all of the things that are required of them. Well, I created a wheel. This is actually a wheel for my own son. I kind of went through and said, where would I place him? And looking at this, how easily is this wheel going to roll? Right? Probably not so easily. We're going to need a lot more effort to get this thing going. We're going to be bouncing all over the place because you can see that his brain domains have been impacted pretty greatly, right? We are really impaired in terms of our adaptive functioning, our executive functioning, our emotional regulation. Attention, we get a little bit better. Memory, a little bit better. And actually, if you go to Jumpstart Psychology, when Dr. Spiller explains this, you can even sort of divide these pies even smaller, because for memory, I kind of started on the average, but then I ended in the below average because he's got amazing visual memory. Auditory memory, awful, right? So you can even kind of break down some things. Language, his expressive language is phenomenal. He was like that picture we saw before, the 18-year-old that talks like a 20-year-old. He's like a 13-year-old who talks like a 20-year-old sometimes. But receptive language, yeah, we are, a little bit more like a 9-year-old in terms of receptive language. And so you can see this scattered profile is going to require some more effort, and it's going to be harder to roll this wheel. What Dr. Spiller recommends is then using these lines around it to identify some strategies and supports that are helpful in these different areas. So if memory is an impairment, what are some strategies and supports? And she actually specifically developed this tool to be shared with schools. So this is something to keep in mind as well. If you can, for teachers, as former classroom teacher, I can attest to this. We got a lot on our plates, right? And I need something that's sort of quick and easy to look at, something that is not going to take me a lot of time to digest, because my student with an FASD is one of 25. And so I'm going to need something that gives me a little bit, gives me sort of a quick glance. And this is a great tool that you can share to do that, and to offer some things that might help at home that could be used in the school as well. All right, so now Lindsay's going to get us into some of those strategies for specific brain domains.
Yeah, thank you, Stacia. So strategies for the adaptive functioning, executive functioning part. So these are some things that have been helpful for our kids at school. You see here how there's a kitchen, I believe, that's labeled with everything that's in the cupboards. So visual charts, either like a visual schedule or labeling things where they are, is hugely helpful for kids and individuals with FASD. You have also a visual here of like steps to do in the morning routines, evening routines. Those are so helpful. And I will say that you will probably still need to prompt your child or individual to use the the chart. But it gives them a level of independence. And in the school setting, it's very helpful because the teacher may be able to say, hey, go look at your visual schedule, instead of saying, okay, here are the 7 things to do now. It's like one instruction. So I have found that teachers are very willing to use a visual schedule just because it helps the child and it helps them. It's not as much, work and attention. Um, The Peer Buddy is great. My both my kids have used this for different reasons. One's for more social skills, and the other for more academic skills. But having it, I alluded to this earlier, but having, a kid that kind of freezes and has a really hard time starting things. And the teacher's mind was just blown because she's like, he can do the whole worksheet. He just can't start it. We have to tell him to start the worksheet. Like, we have to put that into words. Well, this is something that a person in his class who's paired up with him can say, hey, let's start the worksheet, and model that for him, because he has a very hard time starting things, even things that he's done a million times. Repetition is a huge one. I think, I was telling Stacia last night, I always get a call, the first of the year, I always get calls from the teacher about, like, oh, he's, his task refusal, he's being defiant. And I just say, I remind them, I said, this is the brain. He doesn't remember the schedule of school after the summer. Just tell him what he needs to do and just repeat that every day. Keep telling him that. And then about October, I get this wonderful review of, like, he's catching on, he's doing things independently. And so they really need that repetition, even on things that they should know. We think, oh gosh, he's already in fourth grade, he should know what the expectations are, but he needs that repetition, each year to start again. A scaffolding task, kind of dividing them up into smaller chunks. Support for organization. I mean, especially when the kids get older and they're kind of responsible for organizing all their tasks and their homework, and really needing help with that piece of it, of organizing what needs to be done, what's already been done. Break task into small chunks. So we kind of talked about that already. And then one instruction at a time. So, and that's where a lot of these visual cues can help, of saying, okay, do this, and then go back and check your visual schedule, your visual chart, and see what you need to do after that. So just breaking things down to make things more manageable. Strategies for affect and emotional regulation, like Stacia said, supervision, 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 especially in unstructured environments like the playground and the cafeteria, where they're not expected to be focused on something. If you have a child that has a really hard time either keeping their hands to themselves, or, saying inappropriate things to classmates, you need to have a teacher within earshot at all times, to really monitor the kids. So supervision, they don't always have that, but sometimes they can get creative and have the social worker come out over the recess for this kid, or someone else that maybe isn't with the child all day, but can still come and provide ears and eyes for a little bit. A calm corner, break room, things like that. We talked about environment earlier. Stacia did a great job, of, like, putting them in places that they're going to succeed. So giving them a place where, if they do become upset, if they are having a hard time, they can go and bring all of that stimulation down and kind of reset. Fidgets, my kids have done the, like, fans around the chair for kicking, things like that. Those are helpful. Emotion charts, we were talking last night, the zones of regulation, my kids only can do that when they're in the blue zone. So they know it, like, in their calm, they can repeat it to you a million times. But I do think we were just talking about, even abstract emotions are so abstract for kids with FASD. And so even if they're not able to use the zones of regulation when they're in the red zone, it just helps to be able to talk about emotions and say, what are you feeling? Like, what, help identify this feeling. Time in rather than times out. And then distraction is a great one. And there's a note here: remember developmental age rather than chronological age. And I remember, a distraction is something you maybe use with a toddler. And I remember when my son was like 10, and he would get very upset at school, big meltdowns, get big emotions, very loud. And the teachers would say, and then I said, like, oh, look at this, look out the window, and he could shut it off. And so the teacher would say, well, he can turn it on, he can turn it off, he can, like this is willful because, he can just snap out of it in a second. And, we had to, and I was like, well, great. Distraction is a great strategy for kids with FASD. Please keep using it, but also realize that he's not being manipulative. He's not faking it. It's that his brain literally switched to something else. And, he's thinking about that now, which is why it works so well. So, like, even though like a 10-year-old, you wouldn't necessarily think you could really use that on, remembering their developmental age, sometimes strategies that work on toddlers are great for that age of kids and above. Frequent breaks and incorporate movement. So, those are both things that you can, accommodations that you can put in an IEP, but, and then of course, incorporating movement, a big thing is not letting recess be taken away. Like, these kids need to get to move. All kids need to move, but especially these kids, and then see if you can incorporate it in other parts of their day as well. Let's see. Okay. Is this still me, Stacia? Okay. Strategies for memory. So, like I said, I have one child that really struggles with this. Reading has been super challenging. He was grade levels behind in reading. And the thing that really helped him was this chain learning, the multi-step skills. So he was in a normal classroom for reading and just could not get it. And then ended up working with a great sped teacher. And she really, literally, it was like building a foundation brick by brick. And it's taken a very long time, but he's had amazing outcomes with it. So, strategies for memory, some of that is just really slowing down and really taking it step by step. A lot of things we have that we've already talked about: color coding, visual aids list, label items, that all is helpful. Predictable routines. I can't tell you, the older I get and the older my kids get, I just can't tell you how much I have come to value routines. And even, we're not a super structured family, just because my husband and I are not either, but we do have routines, and they don't always happen at the exact same time every day. But because my kid knows that on Monday nights this happens, on Tuesday nights this happens, it it helps so much. So, I think, for school, if you put those routines out there so they can know what to expect, really helps. Provide information in multiple formats that these kids learn differently. It would be a great, if you have a teacher that's willing to try some other formats, that would be great. We've already talked about the chunking techniques. Song and movement is a great way. If you have someone, I was telling Stacia last night that we had a therapist that, you know, really worked with my son because he was into Jedi Star Wars stuff. And so she made up a whole game and a song to talk about emotions, but it was very effective. So, and then this last one is so important, especially as the kids get older, because the expectation is more that they are going to, the students will share the information with you, but create an information channel from the school to your family. Just because a lot of times, like in kindergarten, they send it to the parent because they know the kids can't do it. But in high school, they expect the kids to do it, and a lot of these kids still can't. So being able to come up with a different way to get that information.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. We just talked about that in my daughter's child study today about how we haven't seen a spelling list since October, and apparently she's had one every week. So things like that they definitely need some support with. So in terms of the language brain domain, I put a bunch of different bullets up here, but what I want to focus on more specifically is this one about not using slang, colloquialisms, or sarcasm. This is something that we don't often think about. My daughter just right before winter break, she had done all of her math homework, and the teacher had said to the class, had given multiple verbal directions to turn in the math homework. Give her the Math Madness notebook. Turn it into this bin. Well, my daughter, not hearing that, hadn't done it. And so, the teacher felt that she'd given enough directions and then was like, okay, if you didn't hand it in, you're not getting credit for it. And all of a sudden, Aubrey was like, oh, I didn't hand it in. And the teacher, I love her and she's really great, but we all have different personalities, and part of hers is to use some sarcasm. And so she said, oh, Aubrey, by all means, please, take your time and just go hand it in now. No reason to follow directions when I give you the directions, right? Kind of thing. And so Aubrey, she's like, so can I turn it in? And then the teacher was like, no, you can't turn it in. It's too late. And she was like, wait a minute, I can't turn it in. I can't turn it in, right? And she got completely confused because her brain does not think that way, right? So we have to think about ways that we're communicating with them, and say what you mean what you say, because they are very literal thinkers. But you'll have these slides so you can kind of review some of those other bullets as well. But I just wanted to hit on that one in particular. Strategies for cognition. I want to touch specifically on that additional staff support in school. This can be challenging for families because schools will often come back and say, can't give your kid an aid. Everybody would benefit from an aid. Why would I give your kid an aid? We don't do that for families. But the reality is that our children need that level of support. I heard a great phrase recently in the world of FASD. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about like that external brain, which I think is kind of falling out of favor as language because they have brains. They're beautiful brains. They're amazing brains that do great things. And so a term that I've recently heard was body doubling, right? And so our kids benefit from body doubling. That means being with them all the time, checking in. That's the giving one direction, check and give feedback, give the next direction, check and give feedback. My child cannot take clean clothes and put them away in her room by herself. And I frustrate myself if I continue to think that she should be able to do this, right? This is changing my expectation and changing my environment, because what works better is if I sit with her and say, okay, underwear and socks go in the top drawer, go put those away. Okay, pajamas go in the next drawer. And it's not like she shouldn't know this. They've always been in the top drawer, right? All 10 years of her life, but she can't. So that body doubling, and think about unique ways. I know next week, Kelly is going to get into more of the special ed, how to make special ed work, but that is something to talk about. And how do we think outside the box about what that additional staff support can look like? The other one I want to highlight here is reducing or eliminating homework. Our kids do so much better when they have an opportunity to just rest after school. They have worked so hard. Their brain is working 5 times as hard as everybody else is. And then to expect them to come home and to continue to do more work, they fatigue very easily. And so, how can we get rid of that expectation? And that is something that you can work to get written into an IEP. And I know lots of people who have done that successfully to help their kids. And along those lines of fatigue, teach those complex skills earlier in the day. There's something that's important that you want them to get done, front end it, right? Do it in the morning before they get so tired cognitively. Which kind of goes along with this academic performance, right? And the one to highlight here is modifying tasks to provide opportunities for success. And I love this picture. And I picked this picture because sometimes, if the activity is that you want the children to write a coherent sentence, sometimes, especially for our kids, coming up with some of those ideas on their own can be really tricky. But if I write a sentence on a sentence strip, cut it up and say, can you sort them into a sentence that makes sense and write it? That might be a level of support in modifying that task so that we do know that they understand sentence structure, but they maybe don't have to come up with it from scratch, right? We give them some of the tools to be able to do that. Fewer items and questions on a page. If they can complete, 4 subtraction problems, there is no reason they need to complete 50 to show you that they can do it, right? Getting some of those assignments reduced is helpful. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, so strategies for motor skills. So I think the one that I stands out to me on this list is the the large body movement activities. And because this is in a classroom and it's crowded, there's a lot of kids. This is something that you would want to put like in an IEP or talk to the teacher about because it is in a sense, classroom is in a sensory gym, even though that would be perfect. But even just, we used to put really heavy things in my son's backpack, and he would walk around the classroom just like a normal kid. Well, he was the only one with the backpack on, but kind of going around doing, all the different tasks that the rest of the class was doing, but he just had a backpack on that had really heavy books in it. And that just like calmed him down and was able to keep him more regulated. So, working with teachers to kind of figure out what your classroom would, your student would need in the classroom. Alternative seating has been a huge one, and it's kind of hard. I know going into those like back to school nights, and you're like, oh, where's your desk? And it's like the one right by the teacher by itself, and it's like not surrounded by anyone. But especially if you're having problems with attention or if you're having problems with emotional regulation, if they can be close to the teacher and away from other distractions, it really does help with being able to focus and be able to ask for help when they need it, which is what, for me has been one of the skills that I really wanted my boys to learn is, when you feel like you need to help, ask, when you feel like you need help, whether it's academic, emotional, physical, who is close by that you can ask for help. So alternative seating, even though it can be kind of discouraging, it does help. So next, strategies for sensory. So this is the one that wasn't on the other brain domains, but and I guess the weighted backpack would be under this one as well. Noise canceling headphones. I can't tell you how important those have been for one of my sons. So, that would also be something that they can wear at school, whether it's in the cafeteria is a common place where kids get really overwhelmed by the sound. Um, or once they get older, if it's school assemblies or things like that. Alternative options for high stimulation areas. So, having a different place to eat if they need it, having a different place to, take tests, things like that, where the attention is very important. Then we have a lot of these that, you know, we have at home too, like removing the close tags and things like that. One that I have talked extensively to teachers about is use a quiet and calm voice. Because and I understand why you have to be loud. I'm a mom, so I get that too. But it's actually more effective and they can hear what you're saying better if you are calm and quiet. And so that's a big one for the classroom that I have really tried to pass on to my kids' teachers.
I'm just going to add to real quick, Lindsay, I thought of when you were talking about alternative options for high stimulation areas. That is something that can happen at home too, right? We just
Yeah.
went through the holiday season and we had, 30 people in our house for Christmas. I don't want to not have family get-togethers, but I also need to think about my expectations and to create an environment that is going to help my child be successful. So instead of getting super frustrated with him, like, be prepared. This is going to be a bit for him. What are our outs, right? What can we do? And I will tell you that at a lot of family gatherings, my husband and my son take a walk, right? And that's just the norm. And nobody says anything about it. Nobody critiques that. Nobody questions that. It's overwhelming. Let's go, right? So giving them some options in those home spaces as well for things that we might not even think of, because obviously family, that's going to be fun. This is going to be a great opportunity, can be really overwhelming for them as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah. And then we're going to end tonight with Jeff Noble's FASD Success, Understanding Me. This is I think Kelly is going to put a link in to sign up to receive this by email from Jeff's website. But this has been a wonderful thing that I have used for my own children. And the reason I like it is because it has a page for each brain domain. And you kind of, it has, he kind of explains it. So, you can give it to the teacher, because I know we've all tried to explain this a million times. And sometimes it's like, I do not have one more word to say about this. So this is a different way to get them the information. But then you kind of write in there, like, what things are helpful at home for, like, for attention or for emotional regulation. So it really is, it's a very complete resource that my kids' teachers actually have used, which I think is the biggest selling point on this resource, because I feel like I have given them quite a bit that maybe hasn't been used. So yeah, that would be a great resource to follow the link and sign up for that one, and fill it out and see what happens. So
On you guys have access to these slides, and so just to bring to your attention that we've added some additional resources. This is a lot of information to take in, and I know that for myself, I have to like read things and go back to it like a gazillion times for things to stick sometimes. So just giving you some resources that you can also go to. These are some web resources, and these are some additional text resources. This first one is Vanessa Spiller. She's the one that created that ability wheel, and her book Explained by Brain goes really into depth in terms of how do you modify environment expectations, and how you use strategies around each of those domains. Nate Sheetscott also has some great texts. But we will leave that there for you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, though, because we do have time. We did awesome, Lindsay, for some Q&A. So if people have questions, you can either just unmute and share, or